Hi creative friends, this is Reyna and thank you so much for being here. So I allowed this to completely dry and I just want you to look at these luscious color fields. Like, look at that. It's so beautiful. Like the textures, the values, the colors. And I hope that I am conveying that in this stage, the first, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers, however long it takes, I am not concerned about painting an apple or a bowl or a jar or the foreground or the background or the table or whatever it might be. I am simply working on building up my forms. Now, I just want to show you this. This is a great book. I've had it for ages. It's called How to Draw What You See. And I'll leave the name of this book and the author in the description to this video. So basically what she points out is that anything you want to draw or paint is made up of 4 basic forms: the cube, the cylinder, the cone, and the sphere. Now, some objects that you want to draw or paint are made up of a combination of 2 separate forms. So say the cone, the ice cream cone, for example, it is made up of a cone shape and the sphere. Can you see the ice cream on the top? So that is basically just a ball. And she says that, even when something is a little, like say an apple, for instance, she talks about the apple. So she says, even though it's got like bulges and indentations and it is organic, so it means that, not every apple looks the same, but the basic shape of it is still a sphere. And over here, I want to show you this. So basically a cup, now she talks about a cup, is basically a sphere that's just cut in half. So I'm going to bring this up closer. Can you see how, okay, so an apple is the sphere, and what they are doing is they are putting the ellipses in there, drawing them in there to suggest that it's not flat. It is a, it's got 3-dimensionality to it. But this over here is basically just the sphere that's cut in half. And basically, if I had to cover up the handle, this is the shape of a bowl. So in this particular still life that I'm doing, the bowl and the apple have the same basic shape of a sphere. It's just that this is a full sphere and this is a half sphere. So I hope I'm making sense and I'm not like getting too kind of technical, but these are just the basics of anything that you want to paint. Like if you want to say paint a hand, well, a hand is made up of a few separate shapes that are just put together. And once you start seeing things in shapes rather than objects, it actually makes things much easier, because once you get the shape right, then all the other stuff is kind of like the icing on the cake. Now, another thing I just want to mention is that I personally like to go from journal to journal. I like to go from, painting the feminine art journal and working in like conjunction with Connie, collaborating with the page, as she says, and then I go into my 100-day project, and then I go into, a still life, and then I go into a background. I personally like doing that. It actually keeps me excited, and one of the things I have found for me personally is that when I go from, working in this way to working in a completely different way, it strengthens each of those art forms for me. So a basic rule of thumb is that if you feel excited and curious and interested in something, I would say try it out. But if something feels overwhelming to you, then that's usually a sign for me to say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to do that. Because sometimes I do kind of go into those kind of ways of thinking and feeling and being. Sometimes like I might say, oh, I want to try this out, but then it just starts feeling overwhelming to me, and that's my sign to say, hey, this is not for me right now. So, I just love doing still lifes, and I love doing mixed media still lifes because there's just no limit to how you can combine different media and collage and just I mean, the sky's the limit. So anyways, I'm just gonna dive right in here, and I'm just gonna keep on building up my, you know, my objects. So basically, I'm gonna answer a question that I was asked about coffee filters. Somebody said that they were not a tea drinker and could they use coffee filters? And actually, yeah, I think that would be awesome. That would be a really great thing to use. And you guys, just because I like tea bags, it doesn't mean everybody's gonna like tea bags. And the whole thing about mixed media is you can just use anything and be creative and use what you have. Like, you know, don't go and buy something. Like, yeah, sure, if you have some handmade paper, but so I just want to show you this, what I did over here. So to suggest the fabric, I basically used my handmade collage, and this is just a cheap brown paper bag that I made my handmade collage on, and I did do a few videos on how I made my handmade collage on brown paper and on cheap line composition notebooks. So basically, I'm gonna bring this up closer. So I hope the camera can pick up on that. Can you see that little bit of brown there? Well, that's just brown paper, and those blue lines are just my Stabilo. So I think I just used my Mod Podge and I put the piece of brown paper, my own handmade collage on there, and then I took my blue Stabilo and I just kind of, you know, marked it on the just on the Bristol paper, and I, you know, made them in accordance with the brown paper, and I am suggesting fabric. So I would just say, like, use what you have. And I also found this tissue paper here that's in a really beautiful color. And you could, if you had some tissue paper, but I think the coffee filters would be great because the coffee would leave like just delicious colors and stains, and I think it would be really a great, you know, a great addition to your paintings. So all I'm doing is I am just kind of building up my apple here, and I want to add some oranges, but I want to use it very, very sparingly. I don't want to overwhelm the apple with orange. And I do tend to have a heavy hand, you guys, so I have to be very careful here. I just want a little bit of it. And I'm just kind of trying to figure out like where the shadows would be. And like I said, I'm just making this all up in my head, you guys. I'm not like I didn't set something up so I can actually look at it. I'm not using like a photograph or anything like that. But you know, you can certainly do that, or you can actually even set up a still life. And so I'm just kind of like building up my bowl over here. And because the jar is like in the background, I don't want to fuss too much with it, because remember what I said is that, you know, the more details you put on something, the more it is going to be pulled forward in your space. So it's the same basic principles of push and pull, but now you're using details. So the more details you have on something, the more it's going to be pulled forward in the space, and the less details you have, the more it's going to be pushed into the background. So I want this to be kind of, you know, pushed into the background. And I'm just using my Stabilo over here to just kind of, you know, just build up my bowl. So another thing, you guys, is that, okay, let me see how I can explain this. So when you have shadows, when you're trying to draw or paint shadows, I'm just going to draw a very rudimentary shape over here, okay? So just say that, you know, this is your apple, okay? This is your apple over here. I don't know, I hope the camera can pick up on that. Okay, so when you draw your shadows or paint them, they should be going from side to side like this. This is the motion you should be using. You shouldn't be like you shouldn't be like shading it at an angle or anything like that, because shadows are flat. So the way I was taught is that you just go, this is the motion you go, just from left to right. They should always be flat. That is true whether you are painting or drawing it. The shadows should always be going like so. See, I'm just making this kind of movement over here. Whereas when you are, you know, shading the apple, you're gonna have all sorts of different marks. You're gonna be going like at a very strong diagonal, you're gonna be going like so, you're gonna be doing cross hatching, you're gonna be doing all sorts of things. But when you're doing shadows, and this is true even when you're painting, the motion that you're making is just like so. And that conveys that it's a shadow, because shadows always lay just very flat. So I hope I'm making sense, you guys. If I'm not explaining things correctly, please, please, please just leave me a question or a comment, and, you know, I can make another video explaining that better. And so I'm just kind of like using my blue, and as of like right now, because I'm just building up my bowl, I'm not even thinking like what color I want my bowl to be. Like my bowl could be brown, it could be white, it could be whatever. I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm just kind of going, oh, I'm just building up my forms, and I'm making my shadows here. And see, I'm making that motion like just left to right. See, I'm just going left to right. And I'm just going to add a little more of the orange over here. And so I hope you can see how I'm just kind of building up my forms. I'm going to drop a little bit on there. And so I'm gonna like work on the shadows here, and see I'm using that like just left to right motion, and that's how I'm making my shadows. And then what I'm gonna do is try to find my black Stabilo, and I'm just gonna kind of like do the same thing, but I'm just using a darker color on the shadow that's like closest to the object. So it can be blue as it gets further out. And actually, you guys, once you get the value correct, you can use any color you want. Now, this is true whatever you're painting, whether it's a landscape, whether it's, you know, portraits, whatever it might be. If you get the value correctly, you can really just use whatever color you want and really have fun with it, you know. And I'm just building up the bowl here. And then I'm gonna allow it to completely dry. And I do want to show you guys another book that I have. Now this is called Watercolor and Collage, but I think the principles hold true no matter what media you're using, because I'm just kind of showing you how they are using collage and building up some really luscious textures and values and colors and form, really. And this book is by Gerald Brommer, and I will leave the information in the description below. But